Hello, and welcome to Behind the Headset, where we get to know some of the people who work or create content within the VR sphere. We are graced today by the wonderful Callum Hurley. Hello, Callum, how are you?
Hey, Buck, I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
Good. I'm good. I'm looking forward to this. I look forward
Me
to
too.
every single one of these that I do. So, just in case people aren't aware, Callum, community manager for SciTech Games, is that correct?
Community manager, marketing, and QA. It's
Yeah,
a varied role.
it's a mixed bag, and also creator and host of the VR Game Spotlight.
That's correct.
Cool. Excellent. So, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to get to know you a bit more, Callum. We've got 3 sections of questions. I'm going to say this now off the top. If there are any questions you are not comfortable answering, please say don't answer it. It's fine. It's not a problem at all. I don't think they're that probing, but I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. There is also no judgment with any answer. There are no right or wrong answers on these. It's just about getting to know you. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Sounds
let's
good.
crack on. So the first question is, tell me something about you that I don't know.
Oh, that's a good question. Something about me that you don't know. I don't know. I guess that the first time I ever stepped on a proper stage was for a production of the musical Miss Saigon.
Okay, what were you playing in Miss Saigon?
I was playing the role of the engineer, which, if you don't know the show, probably sounds like a random background part, but is it's one of the lead parts, and that was a lot of fun. It's a part that I could never realistically play in real life because, as many of the characters in the show are, um, they're Asian, and I am not. This was like sort of like your equivalent of a school production during college. So, um, but yeah, that gave me a real affinity for stage stuff. I did that for a while before I moved into VR, and I'll get into all that. But yeah, it's a large part of also what led to the creation of the Spotlight and doing stage stuff within VR.
That's really cool. Okay, so when you were young, what
Mhm.
did you want to be when you grew up?
For the longest time, I wanted to be an actor.
I was
Um,
kind of thinking that's where this was going. That's
yeah,
to be
yeah.
fair.
And yeah, I followed that for a long time. Yeah, I mean,
So
through until
did
a couple of
you
years after uni.
did you like study drama and stuff? And
Yeah, so to this day, whenever I hand my CV to someone for a VR related job, they will see that my one and only degree is in musical theatre.
oh,
Um,
okay,
uh, but so I talk about how there are some skills that translate, some
hmm
transferable skills. Not tons. Um, but yeah, that was my main pursuit for a while, with the exception of a few years. I considered getting into film production instead, but
hmm
for the most part, yeah, I wanted to be an actor.
That's interesting. I have a B in GCSE drama. That's as far as I got
Nice.
on that one. I used to do Amdram stuff when I was a kid as well. Yeah, so I know the call of the stage, and I quite like doing it, to be fair. But
it's
yeah,
it's fun, but the actual industry, it turns out, is not. Hence me not doing it anymore.
I think for me it was kind of like it's not me that's on stage.
Mhm.
You're someone else, and you don't have to
Yeah,
worry about you. I think I don't know if
thousand
that's
percent.
something that relates.
Yeah, 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 100%. That is the appeal of it. Like, for however many hours on the stage or whatever, you just kind of get to live a different life and be someone else for a little bit.
Yeah,
For me, and I'm sure a lot of people, I think that's what the appeal is.
yeah. It's a good little escapism thing, I think. Okay,
Yeah.
what's your most treasured memory from your childhood?
Wow. Okay, my most treasured memory from my childhood. Um. I don't know. I don't know if I could definitively say it's the most treasured, but a nice one that comes to mind. Um, Me and my family, we didn't holiday much for various reasons. We weren't able to, but we did holiday in the country, and
In the
we
UK, yeah.
in the UK, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Um, And we did for a few years. We liked to go to the sort of Dorset area, um, and there was a nice pebble beach we liked to go to where you could, you know, there were certain types of rock you could break them open and potentially find, like, really old fossils and things like
Hmm.
that buried in the stone. Um, and I remember one year in particular when we went there, and yeah, me, my brother, and my sister spent most of the day there, and we managed to find a bunch of fossils. It's really simple, but I don't know, that's one that's always stuck with me for some reason.
Do you still have any of them,
I've
or
still got them. I've not got any of them physically here with me. They're at my
no?
parents'
It's
house,
fine.
but we do have them. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's really nice. Okay, you're going to host a dinner party. You can invite any three people, living or dead, real or fictional, to this dinner party. Who are you inviting?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. I am inviting uh Hideo Kojima.
Okay, with his
Um,
soul-sucking machine that he has for all the celebrities. I guess.
that's the thing. If you want to look at it logistically, as soon as you've done that part, he can get in
Hmm.
contact with anyone else.
That's very true.
Yeah, Hideo Kojima for sure. Um, Satoshi Tajiri. He is the creator of Pokemon.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask him,
Um,
like, I don't know that
who
name.
is
Sort of
he
thing.
is but he largely stays away from the media, so there is so much I would be curious to
Right.
ask and learn.
Okay. So he's a bit
Um,
of a dark horse in the gaming world. No one really knows much
yeah,
about
he
them as a
largely he kind
person.
of yeah, he like kind of created it, stepped back, and then he's still like he's still fairly high up from what I understand in the
Hmm.
Pokemon company or whatever. But yeah, he doesn't really do interviews and stuff with the very odd exception.
Cool.
Um,
I've never played a Pokemon game.
really,
Yeah, never been interested at all. I'm
that's
sure
totally
people
fair.
actually tell a lie. I did put Pokemon Go on the phone just because I wanted to see what that was
Okay,
like.
yeah.
But other than that, I've not played an, let's use the phrase, actual Pokemon game.
I mean, I tell you, with Pokemon Go, it makes sense. There were a few weeks in 2016 where I believe we truly achieved world peace for a small, for like 2 weeks.
It was really surprising because you would literally look around and you'd see people doing the movement on their phone, and you knew exactly what they were doing at that point. It was really
I've
interesting.
I've still got somewhere. I'll have to find it and send it to you. A very short video I took while it was very popular. Me and a friend were walking around central London, and we found a huge group of people in this one tiny little park. And we were like, okay, there must
Hmm.
be something going on here. And about half an hour later, someone runs up to the park and basically shouts, "There's a Dratini down this way." And just this entire hundreds of people in this park just start running towards this road that he's pointed us to. It was one of the most bizarre things I've ever experienced. Um, but yeah, the main games they're fun RPG. It depends how you feel about RPGs.
Again, it's
Um,
horses for courses when it comes to gaming. I'm very much like people like what they like, and if you like it as well, great. And if you don't, that's also great. Everyone likes different things, and I think that's good. If everyone liked the same thing, we'd be the Borg, and
totally.
and we all saw how that ended. You got one more
In terms of
guest.
the third person, um, that is a very, very difficult question. Um,
Remember, they don't have to be real. They can be fictional people or real people.
that's
Yeah, it's
interesting.
entirely up to you. They can be alive. They can be dead. It's whatever you want. This is your party.
Um, I would probably, you know what? I would invite Dara O'Brien as my
Okay,
third guest.
sure.
He's my favorite comedian, and not only someone that I would like to meet, but someone that I think would make the whole dinner party a lot more fun.
He's also quite into the gaming side of things as well, isn't he?
He is,
So,
yeah, yeah.
so having those other two guests would actually merge quite well
Might
together,
work.
I think. I would be very interested to hear Hideo Kojima and Dara O'Brien going at it together, because that would be quite interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good selection of guests. That would be an interesting night. Cool. Okay.
It would, providing we've got decent and fast translators.
Well, this is very true. I can hook you up with that after working in Honda for 5 years. I know some good translators, so I can sort that out quite easily. That's not a problem. Okay. What would you like to change about yourself?
Oh, that's a question. Um, oh, many, many things, but let's say, I, funnily enough, it kind of comes out through this. I would like to be able to speak more clearly and confidently without pre-writing. Uh,
Okay.
you'll get and you'll notice as you put this together before putting it out, and I'm sure viewers will notice as well. I and ah a lot, and I'm very sorry for pointing that out for anyone watching.
It's fine. I mean, one of the things I did not want to do with this series was to give people the questions beforehand, because I
Mhm.
didn't want pre-prepared answers. I wanted people off
Sure.
the cuff, natural chatting and that sort of thing, and just keep it a bit light and loose and actually get
Yeah,
the instant reaction, rather than someone maybe having that instant reaction and then pausing and going, oh, actually, no, I don't want to say that, and that sort of thing. Or maybe, or trying to be a bit more deep with it. But it's like, no,
I
this
get.
is just a natural thing, is what we're trying to
You
do.
know, even when I know what I want to say,
Hmm.
unless it's written and either in front of me or rehearsed, I don't know why. The ums aren't always me thinking. It's sometimes I think just filling the space.
Sure.
But
No, I understand that. So some people, and I do it as well, it's the awkward silence and they're not comfortable
Mhm.
with that sort of thing. And it's just trying to fill that thing. You feel like you have to make some sort of interaction or noise to show that you're still engaged and that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
Where, yeah, is that the kind of thing that you mean? Or I don't want
I
to put
think
words
to
in
an
your
extent,
mouth.
yeah.
I'm just,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, cool. So, how do you deal with criticism?
That's something I've been working on a lot the last, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so. Something that was pointed out to me by a friend that shouldn't have needed to be pointed out to me, but I tend to get defensive quite easily.
Hmm.
Um, not in terms of not taking, I will take on the feedback, but defensive in the sense of I'll always need to explain why I did something the way I did it. Like I always feel the need to make sure they understand what my thought process was and that it definitely wasn't just me being stupid, uh and I'm trying very hard to work on not doing that, just taking the feedback and moving on, because it doesn't really matter to the person giving the feedback why I made the decision to do it the way I did it. Um so I think I'm getting better at it. Uh but also I have been very blessed in that the majority of the people around me are people who are very gentle at giving feedback. Um, so how I would react to, you know, the kind of feedback that larger people on the internet get from the wider internet of people, I don't really know, but it's something I'm working on.
Yeah, I mean that in this day and age is like the minute you put like out a tweet or a
Hmm.
comment on something, everyone and their dog can see it, and you don't know what's gonna come in and that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
And I personally just try and ignore, but sometimes like to have fun with them. But you got to be careful with that sort of thing. So
yeah.
again, I think it's knowing your audience. But I think if any criticism comes from a good place, then
Hmm.
it's worth listening to and taking on board and seeing what you can
100%.
do with that. I think so. Okay. So, what type of routine do you follow daily, if any routine at all?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I don't really follow much of a daily routine.
Hmm.
Even though my day is structured in the sense of like your 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 and whatever. But yeah, I'll have days where I get up nice and early. my shower, I'll make a nice cup of tea, maybe some toast, whatever. I have some mornings where I roll out of bed 20 minutes before I need to start work. I throw some clothes on, and I start, So um, it totally varies. I'm not the most structured and routine person. I struggle to stick with it if I try. Um, yeah, so it totally varies, but it is some form of either rolling out of bed and start working, or if I do have the time, yeah, just a shower, cup of tea, piece of toast, real simple.
Cool. What about the rest of the day? Is that just always
Yes,
different,
I mean,
or?
my work day varies just because of the nature of my job, which I quite appreciate, to be honest. So I'll
Hmm.
be working until about 6 o'clock. I try generally to take my lunch break around the same time every day, around 1 o'clock. Um, there's one day a week I can't do that. It's a work thing at 1 o'clock and whatever. Uh, yeah, when I finish at 6, what I tend to do actually is at around 5:30. Um, I will, depending on what I'm planning to do for dinner, I will start dinner. So especially if it's chucking something in the oven, I'll probably do it then. So I'll be close to finished when I actually finish work. Or if it's something in the slow cooker, I'll do it earlier in the day. But I try and get that started before I finished. I like to try and get a slightly earlier dinner where I can, so that I can do something with my evening. And what that will be will vary. Sometimes it's sitting down with a game or a film. Sometimes that's going over to a friend's place. I'm very lucky and thankful. A lot of my friends are very close by. Um, or a lot of times, especially at the moment, that is getting back to my computer and working on the VR game Spotlight.
Yeah, I'd
That is
say
done in my
that must
evenings and
take a
weekends.
lot of your time getting that
It
sorted.
does, yeah. Particularly as we get to like October now when we're recording this.
Hmm.
Um, it gets pretty full on and takes up a good few of my evenings and maybe a weekend.
Cool, but it's a credit to you that you do actually put that amount of work in, and you do come up with
No,
some really
thanks.
good spotlights. So yeah, I mean, I'm
I really
slightly
appreciate
biased, I'll admit, considering you
it.
asked me to host one part of it last year. But yeah, which again, thank you for that. That was really cool of you.
No,
Um,
thank you for doing it. I needed people to come up on stage, and I needed people who I felt uh, could comfortably do so. And yeah,
mhm.
I'm really happy with how it turned out.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
it was good. It was really good. You're welcome, man. Okay, who has inspired you the most?
Oh, that's also quite a question. Um,
I have
uh,
thought about these questions. I haven't just randomly put them together like
yeah.
this.
Yeah, when I respond with "That's a good question," I haven't thought much about that before.
And that's good,
Um,
because I kind of want
uh,
the instant thing that pops in your head.
um, Probably realistically, and I guess I'm thinking more the last few years here, but it's probably the most trackable for me.
Hmm.
It was Jeff Keighley.
Okay.
Um,
From the Game Awards,
yeah.
Jeff Keighley, I Love the Muppets. Yes.
Yeah. There's a lot of asterisks to that, but yeah, I would say
I was going to say, if you judging that we've just asked you how you deal with criticism, that comment might get a few things because he's not the most
that would
beloved
be totally
character.
fair. No, he's not, and the way he's dealt with a lot of industry things over the last year has been pretty poor. Um, Completely ignoring a lot of the pretty apparent negative things around our industry at the moment, completely, and then uh, yeah,
Yeah. But I get the sort of relationship between the Game Awards and your VR Spotlight. It's kind of the same sort of thing, and where he's taken that. And I guess
yeah. I guess
that's
a lot of it comes down to that kind of, if you want to do something, just do it.
yeah.
I guess I would attribute some of that as well to the group Kind of Funny, who
Hmm.
are a group of ex-IGN stuff. Well, more than that now, however many years down the line, who do a lot of different podcasts and stuff. I can actually trace it back to a specific thing. Back in, I want to say it was, I don't know, 2019 or something like that. Um, Sony had been doing their own event in December every year called PSX, PlayStation Experience. Um, and one particular year, it was getting later and later and later for when they would announce it. It was becoming clear they weren't doing it that year. Um, and they'd the kind of funny guys made kind of an off the hand comment on one of their podcasts about like, well, if they're not going to do something, we'll do something.
Hmm.
And then when it's confirmed they weren't doing PlayStation Experience, they actually did, and they had devs reach out to them, and they reached out to devs, and they put together a game showcase in place of the one that Sony would normally do. Um, and that was very much oh yeah, I guess you can just do that stuff. Like you can just do something. Whether it will be successful is a whole other question. But sometimes if you want to see something done, it is something you can just do, and that's largely where the spotlight came from. So I would say probably a combination of Jeff Keighley and Kind of Funny somewhere in there. I'd say pretty big
Yeah, I
inspiration.
mean, it ties back to the kind of you miss 100% of the shots you don't take,
100%.
isn't it? So yeah, cool. Right, that's everything on the getting to know you section. And the next section is more about your sort of experience with sort of VR and gaming and that sort of stuff. So, what was your first experience in gaming?
I don't know that I could put a pin on my exact first experience. I'm just simply too young to remember. But some of my earliest memories um, were with Sega Mega Drive games.
Okay.
And that's where an affinity for Sonic comes from for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when I was a kid, we were burgled, and our Sega Mega Drive was stolen.
Oh
Um,
no.
and my and at that point, my dad was like, "It's probably time for a new console." Anyway, the next generation was sort of coming around at that point, and uh, my dad had always been a a brand loyal person. If a brand had done him well,
Oh
he
no.
would stick with the brand.
I can see where
So,
this is going.
so he did not buy a Sony PlayStation. He bought a Sega Saturn. So some of my earlier years of gaming were with a Sega Saturn. Uh, a lot of classics that I love to this day, like the Tomb Raider franchise and the Resident Evil franchise, I actually first experienced with a janky Sega Saturn. But I love that thing. My favorite game for that was a game called Bug. It was an early 3D platformer, um, but it was very basic. Obviously, at this point, Super Mario 64 hadn't come out. And so people trying to figure out 3D platformers, it was still really basic. Like you're still on like a flat tile. You're just instead of looking at it from the side, you're looking at it forward. Um,
Right.
and I picked that up again recently in a Sega Saturn. I was like, oh, I'll get the nostalgia and let's play this again. It does not hold up well.
I don't think most retro stuff does.
Mm,
I think so. I bought myself one of those. I bought something called the Retro Shooter, which is an Android box that has light guns and all that sort of stuff, and it's got
mhm.
like 50,000 games on it. And you kind of load it and go, "Oh yeah, I remember this," and you play it for 10 minutes and then never touch it again. It's what.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Particularly, I find early 3D stuff. When we were still figuring out how 3D is going to work, how you're going to
Hmm.
control the character in 3D and stuff. I felt like I tried going back to the original Tomb Raiders as well. I just can't do it.
It
I
is
do need to try the
surprising.
remaster, but
Yeah, it is surprising how much stuff has changed over time and what we've learned and how we've developed and changed to make things easier for the consumer to actually use and that sort of stuff. And
100%.
whole thing has just been a constant learning exercise for what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
Cool.
But the first like machine that was mine and not like a family machine was my Game Boy Color. Um, for which my first and main game was Pokemon Yellow.
That does not surprise me. Okay, so what was your first experience within VR?
And my first experience in VR was at Eurogamer Expo 2012, which of course is now EGX.
Hmm.
Um, there was a demo with an Oculus Rift DK1 paired with Razer Hydra controllers. I think it was 2012, it might have been 2013. Uh, and the game was Surgeon Simulator.
Okay.
And it is one of the worst gaming experiences I have ever had in my life. Um, I vividly remember putting the thing on and thinking, okay, I feel like I can't really see anything. That was a mixture of the low resolution and just dirty lenses. But first time VR, I didn't really think too much about it being dirty lenses or whatever. I was just like, I can't see very well. I'm given the controllers, and of course, Surgeon Simulator is already like a nightmare to control because it's
Uh,
this silly
yeah.
physics game, and they've given me these experimental hand controllers, and I struggled to do anything, pick anything up. So I basically put this headset on, flailed around for like 5 minutes, barely being able to see what I'm doing, and then they took the headset off and I felt dizzy and sick and I had a headache and I walked away being like, everyone's talking about this VR being the future of everything. I don't see it. And I was, I was like, that's one of the worst things I've ever done. This VR thing is a fad. And I didn't touch VR for at least another year after that.
Oh, okay. So what
Um,
was the next thing you touched? I'm just curious now of what it was that flipped your switch to go, oh, actually, this is
so
something I want to be in.
the next thing wasn't necessarily what flipped the switch, but it was more comfortable. The next
Okay.
thing was about a year later. By that point, I'd moved to London, started university, and a close friend of mine who I've known since childhood, who came to the same uni and whatnot. Um, he was working in a pub, and I went down to visit him. And two of his regulars were making a small VR game that you'll now know as Pixel Ripped. Uh,
Oh,
so yeah, I met Anna Ribeiro, and at the time, development partner Steph Keegan.
I
Um,
I really want to get Anna on this.
Reach out. She's
I
she's
know.
usually quite open to
Yeah.
things. I'll get to it later. Saw her since for the first time at Gamescom this year, and that was an interesting one. Um, but yeah, and they showed me a demo they had running on a Gear VR, on an early Gear VR, where you were like a bouncer letting people into a club, right? Like
Hmm.
checking IDs. That's kind of the most I remember of it. When I spoke to Anna recently, I'm sure she said that was like a student project or something. Um, but that was the first thing that was kind of like, not only was that comfortable, it kind of blew me away that that was running on a phone inside a little holder thing. Um, so that kind of made me realize that maybe my first experience with VR wasn't just what VR was, and that maybe it had just been a bad demo.
Yeah.
Um, and so the next time I tried VR after that, which did properly flip the switch, was the first time I tried PlayStation VR, which at the time was Project Morpheus. They were showing at this event. And I want to say it was called Battle Zone. It's like this
The tank
tank.
game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Battlezone. It's based on it was an old, originally Atari
Mm,
2600 game, which was a tank game called Battlezone, and then they
that's pretty cool.
redid it. It was Rebellion Games, I think, made Battlezone.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and the
Yeah.
the big moment for me, more than it just being comfortable and obviously slightly higher resolution than DK1, all that kind of stuff. That was my first experience with 6 Degrees of Freedom, which I didn't know that was how we would refer to it at the time. But I
Yeah.
just remember being placed in the headset and whatever, adjusting in the seat and whatever, and realizing that it kind of tracked, and I like leaned into the dashboard. I was like getting right up close with the dials and stuff. And I remember that blowing my mind
Hmm.
that I could lean in and it knew I was doing that. The cameras were tracking all of that. And I really, really enjoyed that demo. And that kind of sold me on the idea of VR. As it happens, when I got PlayStation VR, I bought Battlezone, and it made me sick very quickly. For whatever reason, in the demo, it didn't. So I didn't end up playing much of it. But that is the demo that largely sold me on VR.
Okay. So what's been your favorite experience in VR so far?
That's a fairly easy one actually. It's Echo Combat, which was a DLC for Echo Arena on PC. Um, I logged over 1,000 hours in that game. I don't know what it was. It was a mix of the fun gameplay, but also the community that was there. It had a fairly small player base, obviously, A, because it was PC VR exclusive.
Hmm.
This is around like 2018, 2019, so it's also early VR days in general. Um, and it was also a $10 DLC to a free game.
Hmm.
Um, So there were loads of Echo Arena players. There weren't a lot of Echo Combat players. And so you kind of got to know a lot of the most regular players. And have made some friendships that have lasted outside of the death of that game, and people I still speak to and things like that. So yeah, that is easily still my favorite VR
Yeah.
experience.
Rest in peace, Echo Combat and Echo Arena. That was
Yeah,
quite a shock seeing that when that happened, and it was a shame because I really liked Echo Arena as well. I
yeah.
thought it was a great thing, but yeah.
Well, especially when they said, "Oh, it only gets in the tens of thousands of players every month," and you're like, some of us would love to have tens of thousands of players every
Yeah,
month.
it is. Yeah, it is kind of looking at the scales of that one, and it's kind of like you have no idea what you've actually got there, sort of thing.
And worse, yeah, Meta have completely killed Ready at Dawn now, which is very
Yeah,
upsetting.
yeah, absolutely.
Never
So
getting the
what?
Order 1886 sequel. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So, what has been your worst experience in VR?
I'll say aside from that first one,
Mm-hmm.
uh, can I talk about this now? Yeah. Um, it's
Remember, you
been
don't have to answer any of these
yeah,
things
no,
if you
it's all
don't
good.
want to.
It's been out long enough, I believe I can. So I play tested um the Horizon Call to the Mountain
Oh,
game on the
okay.
PSVR 2.
Yeah, so the release title that
Um,
came with the PSVR 2.
yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to go too into details. If you Google my name with that game, you'll see a whole bunch of articles. I like that is unrelated. I played tested it 2 years after I accidentally leaked the existence of the game online. Um, accidentally is the wrong word. I was a young, stupid clout chaser, essentially. But it's fine. Someone had told me about the game, and they were in a position to know and prove it to me that it was true. I put out a stupid little tweet because I had like a few hundred followers at the time. Thought no one would notice. Unfortunately, someone from Forbes did. Um, and then I had, when people like, I don't know if you use LinkedIn.
hmm
The when it will tell you if someone viewed your profile.
Oh no.
When I got like head of Sony London studio viewing my profile, I was like, oh god, someone just told me about a game, and I just put a silly little tweet thinking it would be fun, and it became a whole thing. Um,
Oh.
as it happens, I ended up playtesting the game a couple of years later as part of this like research and development program I was part of.
Did
And
they know who you were? Did
no,
they
I
know?
was terrified of that. There was genuinely a part of me that was like, what are the chances that this is why I'm being invited to this playtest? Then I was like, well, I haven't actually signed anything because I didn't see it myself. I just got told about it. So what can
Mhm.
really be done, As
So
it happens, I then did on that day sign an NDA. And I was
you
like, okay,
didn't
now I can't talk about this game.
you didn't think this was like they knew who you were and there wasn't actually a playtest going on and they're just luring you to the offices.
Honestly, there was this really insane part of me that was like, is this some kind of crazy sting operation? You could trap me in a room that we found you.
That would have been
No,
an anecdote for the Times. That would, if that was the case.
thankfully it wasn't that. Although it did make me wonder. I was like, okay, well, thankfully they clearly didn't Google any of the people that were coming to playtest.
They
I don't know
never
if I
found
should tell
out.
that
They
story,
never
but I have. It's
realised.
fine.
So they never realised that you'd done that before at
No,
all throughout the whole thing.
no.
Oh wow!
Once I actually became part of the games industry, I had to remove myself from the research program because it is specifically like consumer research.
Sure.
So I wasn't able to do that anymore. But yeah, so yeah, they never knew. The thing is, to be fair as well, it wasn't my first or last time playtesting at Sony. There were a lot of games there. I think everything I playtested is out now, to be fair, but And I don't know
Okay.
to what extent I really should have told that story, but I have. It's fine.
That's all good. I think
The
it's a great story. I think it's a really, really interesting little thing where you're like, I did this, and then I ended up here, and they didn't know, and I'm quite
It was
glad.
honestly, yeah. There was a part of me that was truly terrified. Thankfully, it was just purely coincidental that I ended up being selected for the. I say coincidental. I was. They would get a mix of people who are very experienced in VR and not very experienced in VR and whatever. And I was one of the obviously more experienced people with
Yeah.
VR, so that was why I was brought in. But yeah, the reason it was the most disappointing is just because I was so unbelievably excited to test that game. When I'd first heard about it from said person and accidentally leaked it, I was extremely excited for the idea of a Horizon VR game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it literally came about because this guy had said he had play tested some recently and it was like robot dinosaurs. And I was like, robot dinosaur. Showed him
I
pictures of
know
Horizon.
what. Yeah.
He was like, yeah, it's that, but in VR. And my understanding was that it was in PSVR 1. So I don't know
Oh,
if that changed later down the line or if they were using those to play test PSVR 2 games before they had proper dev kits. I don't know.
maybe.
But anyway, yeah. When I then got to play it, I was just really disappointed. I know I'm not allowed to talk about any of the sort of bugs or things that change or
Sure.
anything like that. But that wasn't largely the issue. Like games are bugged pre-release, that's whatever.
Hmm.
For me, it was the fact that it was the Climb Horizon edition
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, and that's just not. I felt like the industry was past that point already
Hmm.
by 2022, which is when this was happening.
Yeah. I
Yeah, so I
think.
don't know that.
So I was going to say,
Sorry.
I think that kind of period, particularly for the PlayStation VR 2, there were a lot of weird choices that were done in certain games. The other one I would point to would be Firewall
Firewall?
Ultra,
Yeah,
and
yeah. It's
so
actually
I
another one I play
I
tested.
I played Firewall on the original PSVR 1 a lot, and I
Mhm.
mean a lot. I loved
Yeah,
that game,
yeah, it was
and
so good.
when I fired up Ultra on the PSVR 2, because I played the previous one, I was kind of like, oh no, okay, I get what you're doing. I understand this. And it kind of felt a bit like Stockholm Syndrome, where I'm kind of
Yeah.
like, no, it's good. And it's like, no, it wasn't. You haven't learnt the lessons of what we do now. It felt like it was built for an aim controller that didn't exist.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Particularly the big thing that stood out to me, and I'm sure this would be a case with a lot of people, was the grenades.
Oh,
I could not fathom that you held a button and you had a reticle and you let go and it threw. I was like, that made sense when we had an aim
mm-hmm.
controller.
Yeah.
Now that we've
Yeah.
got hand controls, why am I not throwing this grenade? And I think you're right. It does give this feeling of like, were they making this for an aim controller that ended up not happening?
It's
I don't know.
possible. The
Um,
first thing in there that got it for me was where you go through the first bit and then you're in the garage and it says press the button to open the garage. Yeah.
yeah,
So instinctively, I reach out to press the button. And as I did that, a thing came up and said, hold down B. And I was like, but it's there. Let me just
yeah,
press the button.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
it really annoyed me.
It
So,
was a
yeah.
shame, and so that was the thing with actually, yeah, Firewall as well as Horizon. It felt like they felt like the way I described them as well in my feedback was they felt like 2016 VR games.
Yeah.
I was like, I just feel like we've moved past this as an industry.
Mhm. Yeah. No,
Shame.
that's cool. That's fair enough. Okay. So when you're trying a new game, whether it be a
Mhm.
VR game or a flat screen game, what instantly turns you on or off?
Um, that's a really good question. Something that will instantly turn me off, and I know this is different for different people, but for me, it's very intense difficulty. It's just not something I enjoy in games. Not my kind of thing.
Not a Souls
Um,
fan.
not a Soulsborne guy.
I like you even more,
I
Callum. I am not a Soulsborne fan at all. I get why
yeah,
people like it. I play games to have
100%.
fun. I don't find that fun.
I do totally understand the appeal for people of figuring out the attack patterns, the animations as they're going to start, so they know what attacks they're doing, and the rhythm of combat. I totally understand it. It's just not for me. Um, I I am a guy who I will generally play games on normal, and if I get really, really stuck for a long time, I don't mind dropping down to easy sometimes. A lot of games I'm either in it for the story or the gameplay is fun enough that I'm not fussed about how difficult it is. I'm just enjoying the actual playing of the game and the
Sure.
mechanics. Um, and yeah, so yeah, something that will instantly turn me off is intense difficulty, especially especially if that's not if I'm not able to change that. Um,
Yeah, I do think
Sometimes
there
there
are
are games
some
that are built to
games.
be kind of difficult, but they have slightly lighter modes.
Hmm.
Metroid Dread did that.
Okay.
I got stuck in Metroid Dread for a while, and I put the game down for months. And then they did this big update where they introduced essentially an easy mode. And I decided to jump back in. I started again, and I got through it, and I ended up really loving that game. That I might not have ever picked up again had that not been
Yeah.
implemented.
You and I are very similar in that aspect. I'm pretty much the same. I'm like, if a good story hooks me in, I'll play it. And if I can't,
Yeah.
if I've hit my level of how good I am, I don't care
Yes.
about getting good. I care about getting through. Um,
Yeah.
Video
Because it's
games are like the only type of content that blocks you from getting everything that you've paid for unless you can
yeah,
actually do it. It's a weird thing when you think about it.
it really
So
is. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, cool. Okay. What do you think right now is the most beneficial hardware or software advancement in VR?
Right now, the most beneficial hardware or software advancement. Um, my personal feeling on that is tracking through standard cameras. Both actual world tracking and hand tracking,
Hmm.
all of that kind of stuff. The fact now doing that through regular cameras rather than needing specific like IR blasters, lighthouses, all that kind of thing. Um, and particularly where that has allowed us to do affordable, easy hand tracking. I firmly believe within the next, I don't know, one or two generations, if you want to call them that, of like, say, Quest devices, I feel we could see a SKU with no controllers release, and that be a comfortable experience for people who are looking for just media, or they're using it for work, or they're using it for social VR and things like that. Um, I could really see that happening, which not only, of course, bring the cost of entry down, but also make the ease of use easier. Before my role at SciTech Games, I spent 5 years at a company making VR content for social care,
Oh.
and so we would work with mostly local authorities, foster and adoption agencies, things like that, trying to show them a controller like this with an analog stick, two buttons here, a grip button, a trigger button, and then say, oh, there's also a second one. Those are two different buttons, technically. This analog stick does different things. And then you go, trying to do that, absolutely impossible. We largely stuck with 3 Degrees of Freedom headsets. And the simple Pico G2 controller, which is very much, if you imagine like an Oculus Go controller, has a
Hmm.
touchpad that clicks in, a back button, and a home button and a trigger, and that's everything. That was too complicated for a lot of the people we worked with, and that's not their fault. These aren't
Hmm.
people who play games; they're not used to seeing this kind of controller, and they've certainly never used a TV remote with a trigger on it. And so, even getting them to use that was proving difficult. What I would have given at the time to have had hand tracking on those headsets so they could have actually just tapped on the things they were going to do or pointed to what they wanted to do and do that, or some kind of gesture that just comes much more naturally. That's
Mm.
probably, I think, the biggest advancement in my opinion so far.
Okay. That's a really good one actually. Cool. So, what has been your proudest achievement during your VR journey?
I mean, it's easily got to be the VR game Spotlight, and
I had
particularly
a
last
feeling.
year's.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that, to try and keep brief the story of kind of how it came about. Um, I'd been attending EGX or Eurogamer for many years. When I was younger, I did that as press. I did have I had a whole website and things. I wanted to get into journalism. I eventually ditched that, but in 2018, by that point, I'd kind of turned around on VR, and it was something I was interested in. And just there at E3 2017, there was a lot less of it than I thought there was going to be. There was this huge blowout 2016 because Sony were launching PSVR, and there were booths and booths and booths for that. And at the same time, Rift and HTC had launched that year, and there were loads of games showing that. And 2017 felt more dead than it should have done for only the
Mhm.
year after all these headsets were introduced. So as we got into 2018, um, I wondered in what way I could kind of get involved and try and bring some more VR to EGX. And obviously, I was not in the games industry at that time, and I didn't have any connections at that time or anything. So I couldn't really help get any games at EGX. Um, but I did, through my previous years wanting to get into journalism and attending EGX as press, I did know a few of the people who ran EGX. And so I reached out to uh, Tom Champion, great name, who was running a lot of EGX at the time. I was like, "Hey, remember me? I'm this guy, whatever." And I would love to do a panel. And I told a bit of a cheeky white lie and said that I already had some developers on board. Um,
Fake it till you make it,
who
Callum.
would
That's
like to do a
good.
panel. Exactly. And so then when it was confirmed, I then got to go to developers and say, I'm
I've
doing a
got a panel.
panel
Yeah,
at
nice.
EGX. Would you like to come speak on it? And yeah, so I had a couple of people come speak on it. One of the team members from Skyfront VR, if you ever played that, it's a
Oh
slightly older
yeah,
title.
yeah. I remember
Um,
Skyfront. I quite like Skyfront. That was all right.
yeah, someone I worked with who did arcade work,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm now going to feel really guilty because I can't remember the third person we had on that first panel. Um, I greatly apologize to
They
the
are
person.
here in spirit. We'll leave it at
Um,
that. That's fine.
you know what? It might have been actually. I think
Oh,
it might have been UK Rifter, if you remember him.
I do remember UK Rifter.
Early
Yes,
VR
long
creator,
time ago.
yeah. I think it was him. I had him on a few of them. I think he might have been on
Chris,
my
I
first
think
one.
his real name was. Was it Chris?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, it was Chris.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it was him because he brought his whole family to EGX that year.
Oh, there you
Yeah,
go.
and it was
Cool.
Chris. And the panel was on the future of VR, which ended up being far too broad a topic for a single panel.
That
Um,
does sound quite vague.
but it was a good chat, and it was great to learn from them. And so I did it again the next year, twice actually, because they had EGX Resd. We did one
Hmm.
there about how tricks developers use to make VR games more comfortable. Um, and on there I had Sam Watts, uh, Katie Good from Triangular Pixels, and Hannah Blair, who I believe at the time was a student graduating with a sort of VR degree and was making some of her own stuff. Um, to get kind of different perspectives on what was being taught and what was being implemented by people who had been in the industry longer. That was a really positive one, actually. That was a great panel. And then at EGX Main 2019, we did one around because it was a hot topic at the time around exclusivity and talking about that in terms of both the Epic Games Store and the Oculus PC Store. It was a big thing going on at the time. Loads of games that weren't coming to Steam, both in and out of VR. And so we did a whole thing on that. I had Sam Watts back for that. I had VR Bug on
Oh
that.
wow, Steve. God, I haven't seen Steve in years.
I might have got Chris back. I can't entirely remember the lineup for that one. Um, and that was a good panel. Unfortunately, the stage they placed us on was like right in the middle of the expo hall, so it was really hard to hear anyone.
Ooh,
It was a
yeah.
very bizarre decision. But after that, um, literally that day, like I finished that panel and afterwards was thinking about would I do another one the next year. Um, and I don't know, I really liked the idea of doing a game showcase. I always had. for some background for that, I love game showcases,
Mm,
and I loved E3 and all of that stuff. I just think it's a very unique thing that the games industry has developed. Our way of announcing games is very unique. It's very flashy. It's very, and I appreciate that. With films, we hear about them as soon as they sign a deal to agree to make it, and I
yeah,
think that's very boring. Uh, I think finding out a game is happening for the first time by actually seeing it and seeing a cool trailer is pretty exciting. And at the time in 2019, if I remember rightly, nothing really existed specifically for VR as a showcase. So I decided I wanted to do it. I reached out to Tom again and pitched my idea, and I largely did the same thing. I basically said I know a bunch of developers who would like to show their game, and
See,
when he
but
agreed with
now you've got precedence because you've done two. That's the thing.
exactly, I was confident enough that I could do it. That it was I think it was an okay little white light tell. And so then when they agreed and confirmed, I then got to go to developers and say we're doing a showcase. Um, as it happens, started working towards it, got a bunch of devs on board, and then a global pandemic happened, and events around the world stopped happening.
Yeah, pretty
um,
much everything stopped happening, apart from what
yeah.
I did, because I was working F1 at the time. So we were still
Oh
racing
yeah.
all through the pandemic. And I will tell you now, going to the circuit and there are no crowds is one of the weirdest
Oh, that must
feelings
have been
I've
weird.
ever had.
Yeah.
Yeah, bizarre.
Yeah. To be fair, I worked through it as well. I had just joined Cornerstone, which was the social care VR company. Um, and we transitioned to work from home, and yeah, I worked through the whole thing as well.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so I was trying to put the show together, but obviously that kind of got put on hold for a while. All the games we were going to be showing came out. Um, EGX did reopen in 2021, but it was a really small, really limited show.
Yeah,
So I decided not to do it. And then as we went into the next year, 2022, I decided to bring it back. Um, Thankfully, a lot of the devs stayed on board, particularly, and huge shout out to Fast Travel Games, who stuck with me from that original version of the show that I pitched them at like the end of 2019, when I barely had anything more than I'm doing a showcase. Um, and stuck with me right to the end. They brought like 5 games. We got to do the reveal for Ghost Signal and stuff like that. Like, uh, them sticking through really helped make the show actually happen. Um,
that's great.
and yeah, that first year was great. It was a little too long. It was about an hour and 20 minutes, and I gave some of the games a little too much time. I
Hmm.
won't go into any specifics or anything like that, but there were a couple that, like, when you look at, say, like 5 minutes on paper, that doesn't sound crazy, but when you're sat in the theater watching it, it feels like longer than it is
Yeah,
sometimes. Um, so there were a lot of real learning points from that first show that I took into the 2023 show. Got it much more condensed, 45 minutes, as you'll remember. Split it into sections. We had a
yeah.
mixed reality section, single player, multiplayer, all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And I feel like the structure of the show was much more solid. And in general, I was really happy with how it turned out, and I feel like that was really the kind of peak. So yeah,
Cool.
that's very much my proudest VR.
Achievement within your VR gen. No, that's cool, man. And yeah, I can completely understand why that is. So that's all of the VR and gaming questions. And now we're going to move on to the Bernard Pivot questionnaire, which is from this
Ooh.
French journalist. 10 questions, very sort of quick fire, just straight off the bat. First thing that pops in your head with your answer, okay?
Mhm.
So, what is your favorite word?
Uh, I have never thought about that in my life.
That's kind of
Um,
the idea.
um, Reverence.
Cool. What is your least favorite word?
Uh, Clam.
Okay. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Oh god, that's a good question. But passion.
Cool. What turns you off?
Predetermined negativity.
Cool. What is your favorite curse word?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say cunt.
Yeah, you can. It's fine. I suspect that's going to come up a lot, to be fair. What sound or noise do you love?
I don't know if you've ever had a pen with a lid that if you put it on the back and take it off, it makes this perfect like sound.
But the popping sound of taking.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What sound or noise do you hate?
Scratching.
Okay. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Hmm. I don't know if it counts to say performing because I kind of tried it for a little bit.
That's fine if that's what it is. So, actor, performance, stage actor, something like that. I guess I don't know. It's what
You know what? I would say specifically singer.
singer. Okay. What profession would you not like to do?
Oh my god, tons. I would certainly not like to be a skydiving instructor.
That's fair enough. And our final question today for you, Callum, is if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Get fucked, you were wrong, but I've let you in anyway.
Callum, that has been Behind the Headset. Thank you ever so much for coming. Do you enjoy yourself?
I did. Thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry I went on a few tangents there.
No. That's what we want. That's what this is. It's really good. So the idea with this is everyone gets the same questions. All the different people that we talk to. I haven't given the questions to anyone else, and I'm not releasing them all for a little while. So EGX and everything will probably be in the past when this actually releases out, because I don't want people to watch them and then know what the questions are if they come on, and that sort of thing. So tell everyone where they can find you and look at stuff that you do.
Sure. Well, my username on almost everything is multicallum, multicallum. So pretty much every social platform, type that username and you'll probably find me. Additionally, if you want to learn more about the VR Game Spotlight, which is vrgamespotlight.com, and while we've not spoken as much about it as you did mention, Buck, I joined SciTech Games this year. Head over to scitechgames.com as well. While I can't really talk about what we're making yet, we're making a really cool game, and I can't wait to be able to tell people about it. So yeah, be sure to check out the socials and everything for SciTech Games as well, and keep an eye out for when we do talk about a game and potentially start looking for beta testers.
Ooh. So all those links will be in the description as per usual. Again, thank you very much for coming, Callum. It's been an absolute pleasure. And let's say goodbye.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
Bye.